So, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Freedom Foods Farm podcast. We got a really special episode today. It's with Boomer from Boomer's Bees. And Boomer, you came out to the farm probably about 2 weeks ago now, right?
Yes, yeah, about 2.5 weeks ago. Yes, sir.
When Boomer came out, we were talking a lot. We did a lot. I was learning a lot about bees from him, kind of asking questions from him, and we both actually forgot to pick up our cameras because just when you're talking with somebody and you're learning a lot, you just kind of forget. And I was thinking, you know what? I was learning a lot about bees because that's something that we might be getting into. And I said, let's bring you on the podcast. Let's introduce you to everybody. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link to Boomer's channel right up here as an iCard. So go subscribe to him and go check out his Instagram as well. He's got some pretty funny videos that he puts on his Instagram and some really educational ones on the YouTube. So Boomer, question: how did you get into bees?
So it was probably about 3 years ago. Actually, probably a little bit more, and probably about three and a half, four now. I just kind of went down one of those late night YouTube wormholes, and you watch a couple videos, and then one of the suggestion things pops up, and a video you might like. And I can remember it was a guy named Ian Stepler from it's like a Canadian beekeeper's blog. He's a commercial beekeeper in Canada, and he's only a honey producer, so he doesn't do the big pollination stuff. And I kind of liked how he was making his videos, and I was like, you know what? I don't really have a hobby, other than sports, and so I was like, this might be something that'd be interested in doing. And so I went to a couple uh, beekeeping conventions. There's a couple of them here down in South Texas, and I went and I saw. I was like, I might as well just dive right in. So I bought it, and I was like, well, there's no looking back now. They're coming in April, whether I like it or not. This I guess a year and a half ago now, and I said, well, I better get ready. I've already bought the bees, and I better get the equipment and go to work.
So that's an interesting story. So you just jumped right in, learned from YouTube, went to a couple conferences. Now, if somebody is looking to possibly get into bees, what would be like some of the main tips that you would give them? Because I have no idea, but it's something that we're kind of tossing around here, especially after you coming out to visit.
The first thing, I would, do what I did. Watch YouTube. There's a ton of great information on YouTube. Just typing in, how to do backyard beekeeping, and then you can venture off from there. But more of the, I guess, intricacies of beekeeping is but if I were going to start out, I would highly suggest someone buy more than one hive because it's very beneficial to help each other. Use one hive to help another hive, and it allows you to spend more time in the hives. Because once you go through one, obviously you're going to go through the other. So it allows you to learn and be able to put your hands inside the hive, the frames, doing all those. And that's really the only way you learn, unless you're going to go take some classes where you're doing a lot of hands-on learning. You can read as many books as you possibly want on beekeeping, and all that goes out the window whenever you dive into the hive. And so, I read two or three books, and as soon as I got in there the first time, it was kind of like, what am I looking at? I have no clue. And that's kind of how I try to keep my YouTube channel. It's like, if you're seeing something if I'm seeing something for the first time, I'm letting you guys know that I'm seeing it for the first time. And it's kind of one of those vlogs that I try to, whatever happens whatever happens while I'm out there is, hey, you're seeing what you get. I'm making mistakes. I'm gonna make mistakes, but it's fun. I enjoy doing it. And for people that are doing new, don't be afraid to make a mistake. Like, I made a huge mistake my first year, and I talked to you about it for a little bit, and it's like, well, I'll never make that mistake ever again, even if I have 100 hives. And so it's just kind of learning by failing, and continuing to move forward.
What was that mistake that you I know what it is, but tell everybody a little bit about what was the big mistake that you made that nobody else should do if they're starting out.
So I got my bees that last week of April a year ago, and everyone, you get it's called a 5 frame nucleus. So what a nucleus is a nucleus colony. It's a little bit, it's more established in a package. So there's different kind of bees that you can buy. You can buy a package of bees where they just dump a whole bunch of bees into a box and they put a queen in there, and where there's no frames, nothing. You're providing all the frames and everything. Well, when you buy a nucleus, it's a 5 frame already established colony. It already has a laying queen. The queen's already laying eggs. The bees that are in there are from the queen. And so it's an established colony that's just been knocked down just a little bit. And so then they put them in this smaller box. You go, you pick them up, and then you come out and you just take those 5 frames and you put them in your hive. And so those have a lot better acceptance rates than the package of bees that don't have any frames. You're dumping them into a box that doesn't have any frames drawn out, and so it takes them a little bit longer to get going. So the mistake that I made was I bought a 5 frame nucleus. I put it into, I use all 10 frame equipment. So there's different size equipment that you can use. So I use all 10 frame equipment. And what I did was you take 5 of those frames out that are in that brand new box, because you're putting in those nucleus uh, frames that are in there. And what you're supposed to do to help them draw out those other new frames, because it's just a plastic foundation on there, and then they have to draw out their comb off of that plastic foundation. Just kind of gives them a guide. Well, you're supposed to feed them sugar water, uh, you know, until they can complete it. That's what they use to build their wax, and use the wax to build a comb, is they use sugar water. Well, they told me, well, you just feed them. If they keep drinking it down, just give them some more. Well, for some reason, I heard you needed to fill up a whole gallon. I use these gallon feeders, or these basically like a 5 gallon bucket, but just a little bit shorter into 1 gallon. So um, what I didn't know were bees were hoarders. So I kept putting a gallon of sugar water on top of them, and they just kept sucking it down. Well, I was like, man, I got in there the first week. I was like, man, these guys are going to work. They are absolutely crushing this hive. They're building comb like crazy, but all the sugar water's gone. Well, I'm going to feed them again. So I did it again. I put another gallon on the next weekend. Same thing. They are absolutely crushing it. They're filling all the frames out. The comb's starting to get a little thicker. The queen's starting to lay eggs and all that new comb. Uh, they're starting to bring in some food and some honey. I'm going to give them another one. So I give them another one. And same thing. I go in there the following week. I'm like, this thing is packed out. All right. I need to start putting on another. It's about time for me to put on another box so they can start doing it again. And so I put on another box to make it 2 full boxes of frames. So I'm like, okay, I'll just feed them, and then they'll just start doing the same thing up top. Well, that's not what happened. So I put another gallon on. So this is the 4th gallon in 1 month. And what they do is, as soon as the queen would lay an egg, and that egg would emerge about 22, 23 days later, they would fill that hole immediately with the sugar water, instead of putting another egg in there and using the sugar water to draw out the second box. They would just fill back. They call it backfilling. Well, when that happens, the queen has nowhere to lay, and she becomes honeybound. Well, when they become honeybound, they make a new queen, and then that's when you see swarms. So usually you see swarms when either something happens in the hive and they create emergency cells because the queen's not doing her job. Well, then she leaves and takes about 70%. Well, in this case, they were honeybound. She didn't have anywhere to lay, so they made a queen cell or a swarm cell. She left, and then a couple weeks later, that new queen came in. And so what I found out after the fact was I was only supposed to feed a gallon over the course of a month. And so you're supposed to feed them, a quart a week. Well, I was feeding them a gallon a week. And so one, it was costing me a lot of money to feed one hive of bees. And then two, I learned a very valuable mistake, because I went in there the 5th week and I go, well, where'd all the bees go? It was like an empty, almost, there was about 30% left in there, but I was like, this hive was booming. What happened? I can't find the queen. The queen that's marked is not in here. I'm struggling to find it. I don't know what's going on. And then I found, one of my buddies who's a commercial beekeeper. They were like, "Yeah, she's gone. She left." you fed her way too much. And so I was like, well, what do I do now? He's like, well, it's an all waiting game. Now the new queen's got to emerge. She's got to go off. She's got to be mated. And then you got to hope that she's mated good. And then you got to hope like a dragonfly doesn't eat her or a bird doesn't eat her. Then she's got to come back. And then you got to see and give her time to start laying eggs. And that whole process from queen cell to her have laying an egg until that egg's emerging is about 60 days. So you're like, oh, 2 months. You know,
Wow.
it just puts you behind about 2 months. And so I was like, well, if I want to get into the honey business, I better not make that mistake again.
Wow, wow,
Yeah.
wow. That's an interesting mistake. I didn't know it took 2 months for a queen to emerge and really start
Yeah,
producing.
it's right around 60 days because when they lay, a queen is about 18 to 20 days when they make a queen cell. So just a normal egg, they just started feeding it a little bit different. They feed it royal jelly. It makes a little bit bigger of a comb um, or a cell, I would say. And then once she emerges, and usually they make more than one queen cell. So once she emerges, she goes around and kills all the other ones that are still in the cells. And so she goes and kills them, and then she flies off to be mated. Well, then once she's mated, hopefully she returns back to the hive that she left from, and then she can start laying eggs. And then, it's about a 24, 25-day process for a regular honeybee to be born. So it's, 18, 24, you're looking at 40 to 60 days, somewhere in there, of making and seeing new eggs emerge in your hive.
Interesting. Wow. So someone that's looking into getting into beekeeping that, like for me, I'm very hesitant to do it because I don't want to get stung.
Yeah.
It's like, you hear about all these bees that, you can get stung a bunch of times and the bees are mean. What do you have to say to somebody like that, that's a little bit hesitant to jump in?
Well, up until I bought my first hive, I'm still to this day I am scared to death of flying insects, and I'm getting a little bit more comfortable around bees, and I'm being a little bit more adventurous and a little daring, and and sometimes I'm like, oh, I kind of hope it stings me so that I can feel it. But I'm telling you, up until a year ago, if anything flew around me, flew up into my face, like it was panic. It was freak out. Wasp. I hate wasp. Um, Bees. I really didn't kind of mess around, but anytime they would kind of come around, I'd kind of freak out and get out of there. The one thing about the protective gear is I've never been stung through the protective gear.
Wow.
And so when I first got in there, it put my mind at ease. I was relaxed, because I spent a little money because same thing. I was scared. I was like, I'm doing this, and well, how am I doing this? My family was even like, "What are you doing? You're scared to death of flying insects. What are you doing?" And I got that protective gear, and it just kind of put my mind at ease. And so I would say spend the money on the protective gear if you're scared, because they're not gonna sting you through the protective gear. And now if you mess up and you get too close to the veil gets on your face, yeah, they could sting you through there. But I always wear a baseball hat that keeps it off. No matter what, it's going to keep it off of my face. And so, you know, if I don't want to get stung, then I gear up and I'm not going to get stung. But here recently, I've started venturing out and using these thin gloves so that I could be a little bit more careful inside the hive. And I've gotten stung a couple times in my hands, and it hurt. I mean, it still hurts, but it's not as bad as I really thought it was going to be.
Interesting. So if somebody, is you talked about the protective gear and you talked about, getting multiple hives to start with. If somebody is looking to get into this, what do you think they need to buy?
So I would buy a nucleus colony, like I said. It's an established hive, especially if you're wanting to get a honey crop the first year.
Mhm.
And so right now is kind of the time to, people put in their orders back in December and January and February, and now is when those nucleus hives are being distributed. I'm sure there's several places out there that are still open to selling nucleus colonies, but a lot of the upper end, you know, not, I would not say famous places, but more well-known beekeepers in Texas have pretty much probably close to selling out all those nucleus hives because they've done it for so long. They kind of know, well, we're going to only make 200 hives this year, and when we sell out, because everyone's pre-ordering, and so they know exactly how many hives they're going to have. But there are still several places around throughout the year where you can buy a nucleus colony, and those are pretty much going to survive. If you just take care of them a little bit because they're already established. They already have a laying queen in there. If you don't do anything to mess them up, they're. I always say bees have been around a lot longer than I've ever lived, and so they. I'm the only one that's going to mess them up. And so if I just kind of take it easy and let them work, more times than not, they're going to figure it out more than me helping them out. I'm usually the one causing a detriment to their hive.
So buying nucleus colony, what about boxes? What about a bee suit? Like what else do you think people need? Like do you need a
So
smoker thing or
yeah, so the ProVent bee suit, that's the one that I had. I believe it's called the Ultra Breeze ProVent bee suit. I bought it from Man Lake, which is it's Mannlake. And I believe they're out of Minnesota, but they do have in Marshall, Texas, so kind of close to you.
Yeah.
They have a store in Marshall, a beekeeping supply store in Marshall, and they're kind of the big name supplier in the United States. Um, for me, my preference is I like 10 frame equipment, 10 frame deeps. And so you hear a lot of different, you have deeps, you have shallows, you have medium boxes. They're all different sizes. So you have the deep, which is the big one. Then a medium's a little, they call mediums are usually honey supers. So if you ever hear someone say supers, that's usually what they're talking about is mediums. And then you have what's called shallows, which are usually used for honey as well. But I like to use all 10 frame deep equipment so that I'm not having to ever exchange thing or, well, I can't use this frame here because it's a medium or a shallow. So all my frames are deeps, all my boxes are deeps so that if one hive needs food or needs eggs or needs more bees, I can just take one frame and I can just put it in the other. And so for me, it's been easy as especially learning where I'm all using the same equipment. I'm using all deep, all 10 frame equipment. And it's allowed me like, okay, I'm missing a frame. Okay, I'll just go buy a 10 frame deep where I'm not having to exchange and make special orders just to fill in a frame in one of the hives. And then you definitely need a smoker. That should be probably the first thing that you buy after the bees is a smoker because I would highly suggest you never mess with bees unless you have a smoker.
what does
And
that do?
so the smoker, it signifies a fire. And so I use pine needles and you're just making a lot of smoke inside. You're continuing to cram in the pine needles, you light them and then you keep shoving them in and then it smokes for 30 or 40 minutes once you get the system right. Well, what it does is it signifies a fire in their natural world, and it makes them gorge themselves because back you know no, I wouldn't say 100 years ago, but when they were just living in trees or living in barns or whatever, if there's a fire, they have to have resources to go and make a new hive if their house is going to be destroyed. And so with the fire, it makes them gorge themselves on the honey and the nectar and the pollen, everything. And so just like me and you, what happens when you eat a lot of food and your stomach's full? What do you want to do?
Sleep.
I want to be lazy and just kind of mose around. I want to go sit on the couch. And so they're not as aggressive when you smoke them. There are hives that are super aggressive. It doesn't matter how much smoke you put on them, they're going to go crazy. But their main line of defense is fire, smoke. I'm going to go eat because the hive needs resources to go make a new colony if they're having to leave. And so it just kind of signifies and kind of starts that process of, oh no, our house is on fire. I need to go eat because we're about to have to vacate. And
Wow.
so it's just kind of one of those things that, and I don't know where it came from. I don't know who started doing it, but it does. I mean, it'll you open up a hive and you'll see them. even in my videos, I'll hold up a frame after I've smoked the hive, and there'll be a ton of bees inside the comb eating the honey. The Lorax or whatever I don't know the parts of the bee yet, but they're basically their bottom half is the only thing sticking out of the cell because they're gorging themselves on the either the nectar or the honey that's inside the cell.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very wild and very interesting.
That's really, really cool. Now, the other question that everybody always has is when they're looking at any kind of business or starting any kind of hobby, it's one, time, and two, money. What does it cost to get into, what do you think it would be cost wise to get into bees?
So with the two hives that I bought and all of the equipment that I bought, I spent a little bit top of the line stuff with my bee suit. Like I said, I was pretty scared. And to get in and to have two hives and to start with two hives, it was right around $700
Oh, wow.
total to get in.
That's
And
not that's
so
not as much as I thought at all.
no, so I bought the two nucleus hives for right around 275.
Mhm.
And so I bought those two. So, you're spending about $500 just on the nucleus hives. The bees are really, or to start off, the bees are really your most expensive thing. And then as you get going, your equipment is the most expensive thing. Because at the very start, I didn't buy a lot of equipment. I think I bought to start off 4 deep boxes. So that really wasn't my big expense. The bees were my big expense. Now, going forward, because I've already established the hives that I have, and I'm about to make splits where now I'm starting to multiply my hives out. Well, now the big expense is going to be all of the inventory that I have, all the boxes, all the frames, um, things of that nature. And so the suit is about $100. Usually you can find it on sale for about $110. And then smokers about $8 or $9, $10, $16 if you get the high priced one. A hive tool, to move the frames around, it just kind of helps you pick them up, move them because they get all gummed up. And then smoker, I already said a smoker. Those boxes, the boxes probably, if you were to, they have those beekeeping kits now where it gives you a whole single story hive ready for you to roll. And those are, if you buy them completely built out for you, I mean, you can buy them unassembled, but if you buy them completely built out, everything, they're about $120. But I got all mine unassembled because I can just put them together. And those are about, $70 or $80. And so
Save a little
I
money.
only needed, yeah, I only needed two of them that had a lid on them, and then I just bought extra boxes with frames, and that's about $40, $40 or $50. So I would say the total was right around $700, $800 to kind of get started with those two hives.
Oh, interesting. So it's a lot less than I thought. I thought it was
Yeah.
going to be, in
Yes.
the
I'm
thousands.
probably, being a year and a half, almost 2 years, I'm probably only about $1,000 into it.
Wow. Wow.
And
Now the time
that's
commitment.
buying all the expensive stuff,
Yeah.
brand new. Never, I didn't buy anything that was used. I bought it all. I mean, there's tons of people across the state, across the country that are selling used equipment. But I wanted to buy everything new and kind of make it my own. And so that's just, I had money saved up and I just kind of dove into it.
There we go. So the time commitment with this, is it something that you have to go check the bees every day, once a week, how often do you actually get in there and mess with them?
I usually get in about twice a month.
Okay.
Yeah, so not very much at all. If I live a little far away from them, and there's a happy medium on how much you should disturb them, right? If you really want them to produce and you want them to continue to grow, then you have to stay away from them for a while because the more you get in, the more they're going to be stressed out. And when they're stressed out, the queen's not laying eggs. They're not bringing in pollen. They're not bringing in nectar, which is going to create your honey. And so you want to really kind of stay off. But at the same time, if you stay off too long, then they're going to overpopulate. Then they're going to leave and they're going to swarm and then they have to continue to rebuild. Because what they'll do, if you just keep that box out there, they'll grow to a certain point and then 70% of the hive will leave and then 30% will stay. They'll make a new queen, and they'll do the same thing over again. Then they'll populate out, and they'll get too big. 70% will leave, and they'll just continue to reproduce until there's no stopping it. And then the only good thing about that is you have the genetics in the area, because they're not going to fly off more than 2 or 3 miles. They're going to be a pretty local, and it's not always bad to have those swarms and have bees leaving, because those bees stay in the area. They stay in the trees, or they go to a neighbor's barn. You might not want them, but they stay in the local area. And so when you have queens, if you're going to be a queen breeder or a supplier, or you're going to be a bee in the bee business of selling bees, you want your local stock being made up of your bees, so that what the genetics are. Because that's kind of, you have a big thing with Africanized bees, which is, you don't really want Africanized bees that are super aggressive. And that's kind of those are kind of the bad name bees that everyone kind of thinks honeybees are, because they've heard Africanized bees. And it is prevalent, but it's not as prevalent as people make it out to be.
So you want to so it's not a bad thing for your bees to go off and swarm. That's a pretty cool thing. I would, just being someone that knows nothing about bees, I think you'd want to keep them as many as you can.
Yeah. And so when you're a small beekeeper and you don't have many hives, you don't want them to swarm, because then they're not producing you any honey. They're continuing to rebuild instead of focusing on going out and producing honey for you. But I would say if you have a lot of hives, it's not bad for 3, 4, 5 hives a year to swarm, because now they're putting your genetics in the local area.
How much honey does one hive produce a year on average?
Well, it depends on where you're at in the country. And so, East Texas is a good producer, kind of the Palestine and South, in certain parts of the year, they have what's called a tallow tree. And that comes in, May, early June. And a lot of beekeepers from around the country come to East/Southeast Texas for the tallow tree, and then the wildflower. So if you look up in Houston area, or like Houston to Beaumont, and then like northeast, that whole area is full of wildflowers, and people from all around the country, they come to make a honey crop in that, I guess, southwest or southeast part of the state during the wildflower bloom, and they'll probably make 120, 150 pounds of honey per hive, I would say.
Whoa.
So one hive, one box, excuse me, one 10-frame box fully full of honey is about 90 to 100 pounds.
Wow.
And so usually for that month and a half that those wildflowers are blooming and the tallow trees blooming, they get about a box or a box and a half, maybe 2 boxes if it's a good year. So they can produce anywhere from about 100 to 200, depending on the year, per hive of honey. And then, a lot of people go up to North Dakota to the canola fields. And so you could look at pictures up there of hives, and there might be 5, 6, 7 boxes on top of a hive. And so you just think 700, each hive could make, a ton of honey, just based on where they are located. So for me, last year, I let the bees keep all the honey last year. Because I was trying to learn how to be a beekeeper. 2, I wanted to get both of my hives through the winter. And so I was very fortunate that I didn't take any honey because of that winter storm that came about 2 weeks ago. They had plenty or I guess about a month ago, 2 months ago now, or whatever. They were able to use all the stores that I left them, which I left, a box and a half for each hive. Well, normal year, that's probably too much. I could have taken a lot of it. They wouldn't have eaten all through it. Well, something like that happened this year where they're not able to leave the hive for a full week. Well, they just destroyed a lot of those stores. And if you look around the state, people lost tons of hives. And most of
Really?
those hives were lost because they froze, or not because they froze, but because they starved, because
Wow.
there wasn't any food for them, because they had to eat all their stores because they couldn't go out and forage because everything was covered in a foot of snow.
Wow, wow, wow. So
Yeah.
during the wintertime, the bees stay alive by eating their honey.
Yeah, so they eat all the stores that they collect, or the food that you've fed them, whether it's sugar water in the fall, because you can take honey in two different times. There's a spring flow, and there's usually a fall flow. And kind of the basic terms is people, uh, you want to let the bees keep the fall flow. You take them in the spring, and then you let them keep whatever they have in the fall, plus feeding so that you can get them through the wintertime, because you never know something like this happening.
So what's a rule of thumb of how much honey that you should leave? If they produce, 90 pounds a box, should you take 40%? Should you take 60%? Or, just take the spring, or like you were saying, and just leave the fall?
Yeah, and so for me, that's kind of my thought process is take the spring
Hmm.
and then feed them, because you don't want them to starve off after you've taken the honey from them in the spring. So you take their spring honey from them, which ends about early June, and then you feed them to keep them alive, and allow them to store some food back up, because the summer months, there's no flow, there's no flowers really out, especially here in Texas. uh, it's what's called the dearth. It's
Okay.
just there's no flowering nectar plants that are out there, and so several hives can starve off during that time if you don't feed them and keep track of them. Well, then the fall comes, and there's another fall flow. You have all those fall flowers that come out with that are nectar producers, and then you just kind of let them take everything after that. And then if they're not, if you get later in the fall and they don't really have that much, that many stores. And what I consider a good reference is if they have a whole box of food, if they have 90 pounds of food, that they're going to be able to make it easily. And that's probably a little too much. I'm just being a little cautious on that end. But if they have a box of food, they'll have no problem making it through the wintertime. And if they don't have a box, you can always late feed them. So you can feed them with the sugar water. You can make it a little bit thicker, so that it doesn't ferment in the hive, being thin and having water and sugar and all that kind of stuff. And so having that for them in the late fall, if they didn't find enough nectar or they didn't find enough pollen later in the fall to get them through the wintertime, then you can supplement that with your own feed.
So it really is like an art, it's not just, oh, go, put some bee boxes out there and go collect the honey when it's full. You really have to manage them properly, or, like you said, people lose a lot of hives. That's sad.
Yes, yeah. Most of the time, uh, hives are lost through the wintertime through starvation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And you were saying that people take their hives down to, the Houston, Beaumont area, and they take them up to North Dakota. So people are really moving bees around. It's not just, here's where you go, here's your box. Explain that a little bit.
So there's multiple things that you can do. There's multiple sources of revenue that you can make from beekeeping. You can be a pollinator. The big moneymaker in beekeeping is pollinating the almond orchards in California in February.
Hmm.
That's a big revenue for a lot of commercial guys. Is they pack up all their hives, thousands of hives, they ship them to California, stick them in the almond orchards for a couple weeks, and then they bring them back, to wherever they're at for, to rest and to make splits, and to double their double their inventory, or they can either sell it off, or they can use, all those bees that they just doubled, because when they go off to California, there's really no nectar, but there's a lot of pollen from the orchards. Well, when you have a lot of pollen, it stimulates the queen, and what she does is she just lays like crazy. So whenever they leave the almond orchards, it's time for them to split. And so if you have 1,000 hives in the orchards, you can bring them back to your property and just literally take the boxes off and use one box, put it over here, put a new queen in it, and now you've got 2,000 hives. And you can do that for each one of them, because she just goes crazy and lays in both boxes. So you can use those 2,000 hives then and travel down to Southeast Texas, or and even in into East Texas as well. I would say up until about the I-20 corridor, from about I-20 all the way down to Beaumont over to I-30, I-45. I would say that whole kind of piney woods area is very good, and a lot of beekeepers after they make splits take to get a spring wildflower honey with those hives that they just made. And then,
Wow.
once that happens in June, early June, uh, they'll usually keep them there until late July. And then late July happens, and then that's when all the canola fields are starting to bloom in North Dakota, South Dakota, North Dakota, a little bit into Kansas, Wisconsin. So all those canola fields are going on up there. They go up there, and that's another honey crop for them. And then,
Wow.
yeah, and so those commercial guys, they'll go to the canola fields. Well, then they won't bring their hives back home. They'll ship them to Idaho or to Montana or Wyoming to these massive sheds. And so then they'll keep their bees inside during the wintertime so that they're not bringing them back to all parts of the country and having them suffer the coldness of wherever they're from. And so that's kind of the new thing in commercial beekeeping is sending your bees to these massive sheds in Idaho so that they can, stay alive. You'll have more hives come out of those sheds than you will have them come through a regular wintertime.
Wow.
Yeah,
What
it's
does
kind of
that
crazy.
do for like does moving them around affect the health of the bees at all?
It does cause a lot of stress, and that's kind of what all of the scientific realm of the beekeeping world. And like I said, I'm very new to this, so I'm learning all the time. But it does put a lot of stress on the bees, and they're at times they're it's called colony collapse disorder, and they're trying to, I guess, pinpoint that this is the reason, and I'm not sure if it is or if it isn't, um, but it does cause a lot of stress, but at the end of the day, I mean, 70% of what we eat is pollinated by honeybees. And so for those guys to, go around and do that, it's a part of life, but it's also a detriment at the same time.
No, interesting.
Yeah.
So is if somebody just wants to, go out and put a hive, because you don't right now, you're not moving them around. You just have
No, they're just,
your
yeah, they're
field.
just at our land. And, I 150 pounds is plenty of honey. If you're just a local guy, you're giving it to your friends and family, a little bit for yourself. 100 to 150 pounds of honey is a lot for one person. But if you're trying to make some money off of it, you need a good, you know 5, 10, 15, 20 hives to be able to sell that. If you're going to go to a farmer's market or something like that, and then you get to two, three, 400, 500, then you can sell it by the barrel to certain breweries or you know people that buy in bulk.
So what is so a pound of honey around here about a little over $10. That's probably about the average price that I've seen, just local honey. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I would say anywhere from about $8 to $10 would be about it.
So are you harvesting about 120 pounds, or is that part of the poundage that you're leaving for the bees?
No, you would, so like I said, about 90 pounds in a deep box. You would take that deep box, and some of that weight comes from the comb. So I would say you probably get out of the hive. Let's say if the whole box weighs about 90 pounds, I would say you would get probably 60 pounds, 70 pounds of actual honey.
So that translates into, somewhere $600-700. So you
Yeah.
could basically make your investment back with one
Oh, very,
hive, and then,
very.
double it with two hives.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. You could sell everything that you have and make a profit off of that. If you
Interesting.
were,
That
yeah,
sounds like a really good deal.
yeah. And so I would
So
say to be able to, I mean, it would take you a couple years with two hives to get your money back.
Mhm.
You know, But if you had four or five, six hives, and I mean, you're making your money back plus some fairly quickly.
That's interesting. So which route are you gonna take? Do you know yet? Are you gonna ship the bees? Are you gonna, kind of produce for your local? How big do you see yourself getting?
Well, I would eventually. I'd love to be, one of those big commercial guys that goes and pollinates. But that's so far, I believe, down the road. You know, I don't believe that I have enough knowledge to do that yet.
Mhm.
And from all the people that I talk to, you really need to be able to raise a significant amount before you're able to do that, because the one big expense is you can fit 408 hives, deeps, double deeps, with two, when I say double deeps, two deep boxes full of bees, uh, to California on a truck. And if you're coming from about Dallas, Texas to almond orchards, it's going to cost you about $10,000 to ship them.
Whoa.
And so, you know, you, you're going to make way more than $10,000 being out there. But at the same time, you're having to, one, you have a big inventory. You've got a lot of bees, um, and it takes time to get there. Especially if you're gonna, if you just go out and you have a lot of money laying around and you can go buy 408 hives or 200 hives and split them and do that, then yeah, that's the route that you can go. But I believe that if you're, for me, I think that you would need one, either be in close relationship with a commercial guy or work with a commercial guy if that's kind of the way that you want to go. And I'm fortunate enough to know several commercial guys from my area that would, if I decided that's what I wanted to do, I believe that they would help me along the way, just because I built a good relationship with them. I went to school with one of them, you know. But I believe that's a ways down the road. I want to try to build from the ground up. And one, I don't have the pockets to go out and buy a truckload of bees, which would sell for 80 or $90,000. From the very start. Yeah. So if you're going to go buy a truckload of bees that are coming from the almond fields, because they sell them every year coming back, to cut their costs, so they don't have to transport the bees back themselves. And so they just sell them out there because they've already made the money from the almond orchards. So they just sell whatever, they might sell 2,000 hives so that they cut one, they make, $100,000 off the truck, and they don't have to ship them back, because then you have to pay for shipping once you buy them. And so, they'll do that. If you have the money to do that and that's something that you're interested in, man, I think it's a very, very, one, it's a very uh, great business to be in, but two, it's also a pretty cool business to be in as well. And if that's something that you want to just jump into, I wouldn't suggest it if you had never been around bees before. And then you will be swimming in bees and have no clue what you're looking at, and panic mode will set in, and then you'll look up and all your bees are gone, and you'll have no clue what just happened. And so for me, I'm pretty detail oriented, and so I want to know exactly what's going on before I make the next step. I try to be calculated in all that I do. And so for me, just jumping in, it kind of scares me. Like, man, I don't want to go spend $80,000 and have
Yeah.
no clue what I'm doing.
But
I'd like to.
600 to $700 a hive, just keeping it around here, not transporting. That's still pretty good money for a beekeeper, right?
Oh yes, yes, yes. Especially if you're doing it on the side. I mean, like I said, I check them 2 times a month. And just to make sure there's, do they need any space? Do I need to give them more room? Do I need to add another box? I mean, it's really nothing too detailed. With two hives, I can go through two hives in 15, 20 minutes.
Space wise, how much space do people need for bees? I mean, do you need like 1 acre per hive? How much? Like how many hives can you fit on an acre?
Well, they usually say you can, in an acre, you can fit probably, you know, 6 to 7 hives per
Oh,
acre.
wow.
Yeah. And so, people have them in their backyards. I mean, you can put them anywhere.
Because when
And
you're out here, we're talking about We have our lane that we're going to be building our permaculture orchard in,
Yeah.
and you said that we could have one just about at every one of our fence posts,
Yes.
and that would be a lot of hives. And
Yeah.
you saw our lane, could it go on both sides or just one side?
Yeah. You could have them all full. And so with our, I went out and worked with a beekeeper, a commercial beekeeper one time, just to kind of walk through and just kind of see how it is. And they had these yards that were right across the street. Well, in this pasture, there was probably 60 acres, I would say, maybe 100 acres in this pasture, and they had right around 200 hives in this hive or in this pasture. And then right across the street, I mean, right across the street, the highway, there's probably another 500 acres, and they had them spread out, but they would have like 200 here and 200. I mean, you can fit all these bees in a pretty condensed area.
Do you have to do anything to protect them?
No, I mean, maybe if you had cows, you could put a fence around them, but when you have that many hives in a certain area, those cows find out pretty quick that they don't want to go over there and ruffle those things up.
Wow, interesting. So there's a lot of potential in bees because everybody's on this save the bees kick because, like you said, 70% of our food is pollinated by bees. And there's a lot of interest in it. And most people don't know about it. I had no idea. I was thinking, okay, you get a bee box, you get like a pound or two, and you just keep it for you. But wow, so you're talking, almost 100 pounds per box. The commercial guys, how much do you think they produce per box?
Oh man. Oh, per box, I would say they're averaging probably 60 to 70 pounds per box
Wow.
in a good year. In a good year, probably 60 to 70 per box. Well, I mean,
And that's moving them around and everything?
yes. Well, that's per site. I would say, they
Oh,
would
per
go to
site.
the Houston area, they're probably getting 60, 70, probably 100 pounds for that month they're in Houston. And
Hmm.
then when they go up to North Dakota, I mean, you could see anywhere between 100 to 200 pounds per hive. And so,
Wow.
I would
Looking
say
at 300
total,
pounds a box.
you're probably looking at an average, if you're 60 or 70 down there and about 100 or 150 up north, I would say, because you're gonna have hives that just absolutely explode and do
Better than
200
everyone, just the way
pounds
it
or
is.
whatever. And then you might have a hive that doesn't do anything and gets 60 total.
Mhm.
So I would say coming out a good season for those commercial guys going from, if they're in Houston, I mean, there's several different places around the world. These are just the ones that I know of just from
Yeah.
talking to people that, an average between those two places, good and bad, would you'd probably looking around somewhere about 160 pounds of honey per hive, I would say.
Talk to me about the harvesting process of honey. I mean, what do you have to do to actually, get it from the bees?
So, um, for me as a hobby guy, I would find someone in my local bee club that has a small extractor, and
Okay.
so you put each frame, you wipe off the frame or kind of cut into the use like a pitchfork or what, not a pitchfork, but it's like a hot knife, a cutting knife, and you cut off the, I guess if the frame is like this and you're holding it and the comb is out, it's off the frame a little bit.
Okay.
It sticks out. So if the frame is running like this, I guess I'll use my phone. If the frame is running like this, then the comb sticks out about this far off of the plastic foundation. And so what you do is you take that hot knife and you just run it along that plastic foundation and cut off all that extra stuff.
Interesting.
And so what happens is you stick that whole frame in the extractor because all you did was cut off the very end of that honeycomb. And so now the honey's just going to flow out. So then you stick it into an extractor and then it spins it really fast. And then all that honey goes against the side, falls down. You put a strainer or like a filter or something at the bottom. You raise the little thing at the bottom. And then the honey just pours into a bucket or you can do it into their little bear cups or anything.
And it's ready to eat.
Yeah, and so then those big commercial, yeah, and then those big commercial guys, they have those assembly lines where they just put a frame on it, cuts it in a knife, and then it goes into this 120 frame extractor that's just this massive, barrel, and it just spins them for 2 or 3 minutes. All that honey falls out, and then the frames come out the other end, and then they just put them back in the boxes and take them out back out to the yard.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a
Wow.
it's a it's a crazy system. But if someone has one of those, I mean, people would do it all the time where they just cut it off, stick it into like a mesh bag. I forgot what those. Maybe I'm trying to think what those bags are called. But it's you can strain through it, and so you just stick all that honeycomb in a bag, and it keeps all the comb here, and then it just kind of strains it, and you can even put it on a filter, and then that filter strains it even more to where you're getting that pure honey and none of the wax or anything inside the honey.
Wow.
So it's like you can just crunch it up in that little bag, and it just drips all the way out.
And this is something that people can just add onto their farm, add onto their homestead or whatever they want or want to
Oh,
call it.
very.
And it's super easy, doesn't take up much space.
Or
It's
time.
really beneficial for you. And you can make quite a bit of money, it seems like, from it.
Yes, and I would say on any farm, you need you a beehive on any. I think that just kind of completes the farm. If you've got cattle and chickens and ducks and whatever, I just think have even if you had one or two, like that's a well, I'm gonna go out and get some honey for my coffee or something, or have some honey around for your coffee. And for me, it's like I enjoy. I mean, yes, I'd love to make some money off of it,
Mhm.
and I hope to one day make some money off of it, but I actually enjoy doing it. And I think
That's the
that
best part.
yeah, I think that I tell my wife all the time, I go, man, I'd love to do this as a full-time job. I can't do that right now, but I just enjoy doing it. I'm not very good at golf. I'm not, I've played sports my whole life, and I needed something out of that kind of sporting realm. And man, I just fell in love with it and enjoy being out there.
So do you see yourself being able to sell honey in the somewhat near future?
Yeah, I think I'll be able to sell some this year. I think I've got a good enough head start. Like I said, I'm about to make some splits. I'm hoping maybe I'm hoping a little bit too much. I'm thinking I can get five. I can go from two to five, uh, but I think I can at least go to four. And so if
Can
I
you
go to
ship the honey? What's
yes,
the
yeah,
restrictions on
oh
that? Is
yeah,
there any?
no, no, you can ship the honey.
Wow.
I guess I better. I guess I better check the restriction on that before I say yes or no. But I would figure that it would be just like, it's a
Follow the
part of
cottage
the
law
the,
kind of
the
thing.
cottage. Yeah, the cottage laws that you can sell that stuff.
Wow, so you have me very intrigued now
Yeah.
because what we everything that we have going on here, it doesn't take much time, which I like. It doesn't take much space, which I like.
Yeah.
We have the nitrogen fixtures that we're using in the permaculture orchard are honey locusts, which should
Yeah.
produce, tons of honey. And it just seems like it just fit into that symbiotic, framework of we don't want to create a farm here, we want to create an ecosystem. We're just adding something that the ecosystem really needs, which is a funny thing because the first year that we were here, we've only been here a year and almost a month now.
Yeah.
The first year that we were here, I saw one honeybee on our property. There was none. We had wasps, we had this, we had that, but I didn't see any honeybees. I saw the first one I saw, it made me go, wow, I haven't seen any of these around here. This year, I mean, it's just like an explosion of them. I don't know what happened, but I'm going, hey, if bees like it around here, because we're not, I don't know if it has something to do because we're not spraying, kind of anything, doing everything more natural, doing everything, quote unquote organic, but no certification. And it's just something that I really think that we might move into. I know Nicole really wants to move into it, and you're the person that I'm going to be asking a ton of questions to.
Yeah. Well, it's very rewarding. I think it's very rewarding. Everything that you like. Being there for 2.5 weeks ago, you get to see the fruit of your labors,
Hmm.
and I think it's as a man, especially in this time, you don't really we're so disconnected from agriculture, or we have been for so long.
Exactly.
I believe it's a part of our blood, and I believe it's something that our human nature longs for, is that, man, the fruit of your labor is really showing off. Whether you go down and cut down a tree and you make it into firewood, or you do anything around your place, or you're going out. I was having this conversation with someone a couple days ago about him just going out and doing yard work and sitting on his lawnmower and then picking weeds in his flower bed. And he was like, "Man, it was so rewarding." I
It
was
is.
like,
You're
that's,
connected to, the earth, really.
yeah, yeah. And I believe that that's kind of our you know, one, it's our pastime from an agrarian society from all these years, but I think it kind of just it reconnects us to how society is supposed to be. And I think when we do that, it's like, man, this is actually, I feel like it's a connection, like you said, it's a connection to the world around us.
No,
It's a
it's just
time to
good to see
slow
younger
down.
people, get back into, farming. I mean, I heard a quote, I don't know how long, I don't know who said it. I almost want to say it was Ty Lopez. I'm not 100% sure. With all the changeover that's going on in the world, there's no such thing as job security anymore. There's no such thing as business security. I mean, just look at this pandemic going on. It's crazy. What the quote is if you want your job to be around for another 2000 years, was it around 2000 years prior? And if it is, you're talking about carpenters, plumbers, just tax people. Unfortunately, if your job was around 2000 years ago, it's probably going to be around for another 2000 years.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants more job security, more business security, this is something that I think people need to look into, because you know what, it's here.
And that's kind of, I was so fascinated by going out to your place and seeing all the things that you're doing and seeing the pictures of your grass, someone else's grass, the same, you know, piece of property basically that just cut in line with a fence, and how different your side of the fence was as compared to your neighbor's fence, just from the practices that you've put in. And then, like you said, I mean, like you said, it's job security. For me as a beekeeper, you know, can I make money off of it? Yes. If everything went crazy, would I have enough, be able to make enough money with beekeeping with two hives? Probably not. But at the same time,
You have a foundation that you can stand on.
there's a foundation to do something there. And at the end of the day, if we want to continue to eat, you need bees to pollinate the food that everyone eats. And so for me, it's like, well, I have a little bit of job security. If something happens, man, I can dive headfirst into this beekeeping thing and help a lot of people.
Well, I mean, that's really I think where people need to be going back to, instead of, being in the, warehouses or in an office or whatever. It's just more rewarding. It's just something that you can see by talking to you how much you enjoy it, and just you get a lot out of it. And it's really cool to see.
Well, thank you.
Well, that's about it. We have just a couple minutes left. We want to keep it to about an hour. But you guys, you and your wife are expecting your first child here in about what, couple weeks now?
Yeah, we're down to the nitty gritty. We're about 4 weeks out. So man, it's
Wow.
my world is about to change so much.
Wow. Well, congratulations on
Thank you.
that. And if people want more of you, how do they find you?
You can find me YouTube, Boomers Bees, Instagram, Boomers Bees, no apostrophe, just one word, BOOMERS Bees. Um, so I try to stay up on it. I do have a day job, so I get a little bit behind sometimes, but I have fun. And like I said earlier, all the mistakes that I make, everyone sees it firsthand. I try not to hide anything. I mean, I do edit the film to where I'm not sitting there staring at a frame trying to look at it for 20 minutes. But if I'm looking at it and if I say something in the middle of it and I have no clue what's going on, that's pretty much in the video.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you have access to a little bit of acreage now, where you keep your bees, correct?
Yeah, we have a family has a little bit over 63 acres just
My
south of Dallas.
my question is, did I sell you on Longhorns?
Man, I'm sold. I'm sold on some Longhorns. And I
You
think
gotta throw them out
once my father-in-law comes out there, you're gonna have another one sold on some Longhorns too.
there. That's gonna be awesome. See some bees, see some Longhorns out in the field, because you gotta use it. You gotta use,
Exactly.
throw them out there. That's two sources of income just off of that, real easy, that you could definitely, expand on. And I see you getting out of your day job and moving into this real quickly, and you'll be able to spend more time with that little kid of yours coming on the way.
Exactly.
Boy or girl?
Surprise. It's going to be a surprise.
Surprise.
Yep. The wife wanted a surprise. So I said, yes, ma'am. And we'll roll with it.
Names?
Well, right now it's hard to tell. I think I'd get in trouble if I said any names right now.
Uh-oh. Okay, better not do that then. Well, Boomer, it was a pleasure having you on. Would love to do a follow-up with it, one follow-up podcast with you soon,
Yeah.
because see where you're at, see where you're going with this, because I think that you're gonna I think that your channel, especially watching some of the videos that you put up, is one of the better ones, especially on beekeeping on YouTube. So it's something that hopefully I have access to kind of text you every once in a while. I might need advice if we decide to jump in, but for everybody else, they can go on your channel, and hopefully you can inspire a couple people to get into beekeeping as well.
Man, I love to. And anytime someone sends a comment on my feed, I usually respond right away. Because I like when people respond to me whenever I'm either putting a message on their YouTube or on their Instagram. I like it when people say stuff back. So I try to interact with anybody who asks a question. And like I said, I love to help no matter what it is.
Awesome, awesome. Well, go over there to Boomer's channel. Let them know that you're coming over from us, and we'll catch you on the next one. All right. Thanks, everybody, and have a great night.